Hey, Reddit. I don't know if anyone will believe this, but I swear every word is true. My name is Alex, I'm 29, and I just stumbled onto something that might change everything I thought I knew about my family. It started the day after my grandmother's funeral. Jason, my older brother, 32, Katie, my younger sister, 26, and I were sorting through Grandma's things at her house. She had lived in that creaky old place for as long as I could remember. Every inch of it smelled like cinnamon and old books, and every drawer was packed with decades of junk. We were tired, emotional, and to be honest, just wanted to be done. But then, I found something that stopped me cold. Inside Grandma's worn, leather-bound Bible, tucked so deep in the pages it was practically hidden, was a letter. The paper was fragile, the ink faded. I held my breath as I carefully unfolded it. It wasn't long. Just a few cryptic lines in her familiar, slightly shaky handwriting. A promise kept, a fortune slept, and attached to it, a hand-drawn map. I frowned. The address wasn't her house. Hell, it wasn't even in our town. It was some place I'd never heard of, miles away in the countryside. Jason glanced over my shoulder. "What's that?" Katie, who had barely spoken all day, finally looked up. "Did she leave a will?" I shook my head. "No, but I think she left us something else." I turned the letter toward them. "Look at this." Jason raised an eyebrow. "Oh, come on. You really think Grandma left us some kind of treasure map?" I hesitated. "You know how she was." Because here's the thing. Grandma wasn't normal. She once told us she had outrun the cops on a motorcycle in her youth. She used to stash coins in old coffee cans and bury them in the yard for fun. She didn't trust banks, doctors, or anyone who wears a tie on a Sunday. So, yeah. The idea that she might have hidden something valuable? Not impossible. Jason laughed under his breath. If there was something worth finding, don't you think she would have told us? That part nagged at me. Grandma loved riddles and puzzles, but she also loved us. Why keep this a secret? Katie sighed. "It's probably just an old note from when she was younger. You're reading too much into it. Maybe they were right. Maybe it was nothing." But that night, curiosity got the best of me. I typed the address into Google Maps, expecting it to lead to some random house. Instead, I got something weird. The land. It used to belong to Grandma, but she had sold it over 60 years ago. Only, there was no record of the buyer. No name. No history. Just gone. A weird chill ran down my spine. I went deeper, checking public records, property transfers, nothing. It was like the land had just vanished after she sold it. I sat back in my chair, my pulse picking up speed. Why would Grandma keep a map to a place she no longer owned? And more importantly, why had she hidden it? I didn't sleep that night. Because deep down, I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't over. I really wish I could say this was the part where I realized I was overreacting, where Jason and I had a laugh and went home. But no. This was the part where things started getting really messed up. It took me 2 full days to convince Jason to drive out to the location on Grandma's map. He refused at first, telling me I was an idiot for thinking she had buried anything valuable. But I knew my brother. He might act like he didn't care, but deep down, he was just as curious as I was. Katie wanted nothing to do with it. She thought we were disrespecting Grandma's memory by digging into things she had clearly chosen to leave behind. I didn't see it that way. If she had taken the time to draw a map, it meant she had wanted someone to find it. The drive took 3 hours. At first, it was all highways and gas stations, but the deeper we went into the countryside, the less civilization there was. No streetlights. No houses. Just miles of nothing. The road turned to gravel, then to dirt. When the GPS finally announced, "You have arrived," Jason slowed the car. We stared out the windshield. And I swear to God, my stomach dropped. There was nothing here. No house. No ruins. Just a vast empty field with overgrown grass that swayed eerily in the wind. Jason groaned. "Jesus Christ. Alex. We drove 3 hours for a field. But I wasn't looking at the grass. I was looking at the tree. It was huge, with a thick, twisted trunk, the exact one from Grandma's map. The house was gone. But the tree was still here. I stepped out of the car. The air smelled like damp earth and something faintly metallic. I didn't hesitate. I grabbed the shovel from the trunk and walked toward the tree. Jason stayed by the car, arms crossed. "You're actually digging?" I didn't answer. I just drove the shovel into the dirt and started digging. Because here's the thing. I knew Grandma. If she went through the trouble of hiding a map, it wasn't for nothing. At first, Jason just stood there, watching. Then, after a long sigh, he grabbed another shovel. "Fine. But if we dig up some ancient raccoon bones, I'm kicking your ass." The digging was slow. The ground was packed, the soil thick. Sweat dripped down my back. My arms ached. Jason muttered under his breath the whole time, mostly about what a waste of time this was. And, clang. We both froze. Jason wiped the sweat from his forehead. "Tell me that was a rock." I dropped to my knees and started scraping away the dirt with my hands. My heart was hammering. And then we saw it. A rusted metal box. It was buried about 2 feet deep, covered in grime, but still intact. Jason let out a nervous laugh. "Okay, that's actually kinda weird." With shaking hands, I pried the box open. Inside, we found 3 things. 1. Stacks of old letters, bound together with twine. 2. A small, worn leather journal. 3. A gun. Jason and I just stared. Grandma had never owned a gun. So whose was this? And why the hell had she buried it? Jason picked up one of the letters, his voice suddenly quiet. "These are dated from 1952. I grabbed the journal, flipping through brittle pages. My hands were sweating. And then, I saw something that made my blood run cold. Every single letter was addressed to someone named Margaret Holloway. But here's the problem. Grandma's name was Margaret, but her last name was never Holloway. I looked at Jason. "Dude." His voice was barely a whisper. "What the hell did we just find?" I pulled the first letter free from its twine and started reading aloud. "To the one who finds this, I hope you understand." My throat was dry. I did what had to be done. He won't find me now. But if someone ever comes looking, please, don't tell them where I am. Bury this with the past. Jason exhaled sharply. "Alex, I think Grandma was running from someone." I shook my head. "No, not running." I looked down at the gun in the box. "I think she was hiding." And then, a car engine roared in the distance. Headlights flashed through the trees. Jason and I snapped our heads up. A truck was pulling onto the field. Someone was here. Someone knew we were digging. Jason and I froze, crouched near the half-dug hole. The headlights cast long shadows through the trees, bouncing off the rusted box at our feet. The truck rolled to a stop about 50 feet away. The driver didn't get out. Jason's voice was tight. "We need to leave. Now." But I wasn't moving. Not yet. Whoever was sitting in that truck. They weren't surprised to see us here. They were just watching. And that scared me more than anything. Jason grabbed my arm. "Alex, move." I snapped out of it. We shoved everything back into the box. Letters, gun, all of it, then lifted it between us. The second Jason took a step backward, the driver's side door creaked open. A man stepped out. He was old, 70s, maybe, but built like someone who had spent his whole life doing hard labor. His skin was weathered, his hands rough, and there was something in the way he looked at us that made my stomach twist. Like he knew exactly who we were. Like he had been waiting for this. Jason squared his shoulders. "Can we help you?" The man didn't answer right away. He took his time, his boots crunching against the dirt as he stepped closer. Then he stopped, eyes flicking to the ground where we had been digging. "You Margaret's kin?" My mouth went dry. Jason hesitated. "Yeah, why?" The man let out a slow breath, shaking his head. "Figured someone might come poking around one day." I tightened my grip on the box. "Figured? What the hell did that mean? Jason's patience was thinning. Look, we were just leaving. The man smirked. Not before you found it, though, huh? His eyes dropped to the rusted box in my hands. She always was good at keeping secrets. My heart slammed against my ribs. He knew. Jason tensed. Who are you? The man ignored the question. If I were you, I'd put that box back where you found it. I felt a chill run down my spine. Jason exhaled sharply. Yeah. And why's that? The man's smirk disappeared. Because some ghosts don't stay buried. I swallowed hard. The way he said it, like it was a warning, like he wasn't talking about literal ghosts but something far worse, sent every instinct in my body into high alert. Jason wasn't having it. He took a step forward, voice firm. Look, I don't know who you are, but we're taking this box, and we're leaving. You got a problem with that? For a long moment, the man just stared at us. Then, finally, he nodded. No problem, he said. But don't say I didn't warn you. Without another word, he turned, walked back to his truck, and drove off into the night. Jason let out a breath. What the hell was that? I shook my head, watching the taillights disappear down the dirt road. No idea. But one thing was clear. We weren't the only ones who knew about Grandma's secret. And now, someone was watching. Neither of us spoke on the drive back. The lockbox sat between us in the passenger seat, its rusted edges catching the occasional flicker of headlights from passing cars. Jason gripped the steering wheel tighter than usual, his jaw clenched like he was trying to convince himself this was still some kind of joke. It wasn't. That man, whoever he was, knew something. He hadn't asked what we found. He hadn't asked if we needed help. He had just warned us. Like he already knew what was inside the box. Like he had been waiting for someone to come looking. Jason finally spoke. We should have put it back. I turned to him, startled. What? He kept his eyes on the road. Whatever Grandma was into, it wasn't good. That guy, he didn't just happen to be out there, Alex. He was waiting. And now, he knows we have this. I crossed my arms. So, let him know. It's ours. Grandma left it for us. Jason exhaled sharply, shaking his head. You don't get it. This isn't about money or some family heirloom. This is something else. Something people are still watching for. I stared at the box. The gun. The letters. The journal. Grandma had been hiding something for over 60 years. And whatever it was, someone still cared enough to keep an eye on it. Jason didn't say another word the whole ride home. Neither did I. Back at my apartment, we set the lockbox on the kitchen table and just stared at it. Jason leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. What now? I hesitated. We read it. He didn't look thrilled, but he didn't stop me either. I grabbed the first letter from the stack, the paper fragile under my fingers. The ink was faded, the handwriting small and careful. It was dated October 12, 1952. Margaret, I don't know if you'll ever read this, but I need you to understand. I had no choice. You told me to run, so I did. You told me to keep quiet, so I have. But he's still looking. He hasn't given up. And I don't think he ever will. If you're still out there, I need to know. If you're safe, I need to know. Please. Don't let me die without knowing. I read the letter twice, my pulse kicking up. Jason shifted beside me. Who the hell is that? I shook my head. I don't know. Jason picked up another letter, flipping through the stack. They're all signed the same way. Just A. No last name. No details. But they're all addressed to Margaret Holloway. Margaret Holloway. Who the hell was Margaret Holloway? Because it sure as hell wasn't Grandma's name. I grabbed the journal next. The leather was cracked, the pages thin from age. The first page made my stomach drop. Margaret Holloway. It was written in her handwriting. Jason's voice was barely a whisper. This doesn't make sense. I flipped through the pages, my fingers shaking. Most of it was written in rushed, paranoid scribbles. Some pages were crossed out so violently the paper had torn. But the further I read, the clearer the truth became. Margaret Holloway wasn't some stranger. It was Grandma. She had changed her name. She had changed her entire identity. Jason exhaled slowly. What the hell was she running from? I shook my head. I don't know. And then, I turned to the final page of the journal. My blood ran cold. Because this page wasn't like the others. This one wasn't written in her usual neat handwriting. It was rushed. Sloppy. Like she had written it in a panic. If anyone finds this, I'm sorry. I never wanted this to be your burden. Don't trust him. He'll say he was there. He'll say he remembers. But he's lying. He's always been lying. Don't let him take it. Don't let him find me. Please, whatever you do, don't let him finish what he started. Jason's face was pale. Who is she talking about? I didn't answer. Because I already knew. The man at the field. The one who had warned us to leave. The one who had been waiting. He wasn't just some old local. He had been a part of this. And worst of all, he had lied to us. Jason and I didn't sleep that night. The lockbox sat on the kitchen table between us like a loaded gun. We had read every letter, every word of Grandma's journal. The truth was undeniable now. Margaret Holloway was our grandmother. She had changed her identity, buried her past, and spent 60 years pretending she was someone else. But the bigger question was why. Jason tapped his fingers against the table, his leg bouncing restlessly. You saw what she wrote. Don't trust him. Who the hell was she talking about? I already knew. The man from the field. The one who told us to leave the box buried. He hadn't been warning us. He had been testing us. To see if we already knew the truth. I grabbed my phone and did something I should have done earlier. I Googled the name Margaret Holloway. The search results loaded, and I felt my stomach twist. Newspaper clippings. Court documents. A missing persons case. Jason's face was pale as he scrolled through the articles. Holy shit. Grandma, Margaret Holloway, had disappeared in 1954. She wasn't just running. Someone had been looking for her. And then Jason clicked on an article that made the room feel 10 degrees colder. A murder. A man named Victor Lyle had been shot in his home on October 10, 1954. The case was never solved. The last person seen with him? A woman named Margaret Holloway. Jason shot out of his chair. No. No way. You're telling me Grandma, our grandma, killed someone. I didn't answer. Because the truth was sitting in that rusted metal box on our table. A gun. A journal full of guilt. A stack of letters from someone terrified for their life. She hadn't buried treasure. She had buried evidence. Jason ran a hand through his hair, pacing. I mean, maybe it was self-defense. Maybe this Victor guy. A knock at the door. We both froze. It was nearly 3 in the morning. Nobody knocked on your door at 3 in the morning for a good reason. Jason reached for the box instinctively, like he thought someone was about to kick the door in and take it from us. Another knock. Louder. I forced myself to move, creeping toward the peephole. My breath caught. It was him. The man from the field. He knew where we lived. I turned back to Jason, my voice barely above a whisper. We're in trouble. Jason's face went pale. No way. No fucking way. Another knock. Harder this time. I took a slow step back from the door, my heart hammering in my chest. How did he find us? Jason grabbed the lockbox, his fingers tightening around the edges like he was ready to throw it out the window and pretend none of this ever happened. The man knocked again. Then, his voice, calm, patient, like he had all the time in the world. Boys. I know you're in there. Jason and I locked eyes. We were screwed. I did the only thing I could think of. I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. It rang once. Twice. Then, click. No service. What the hell? I stared at my screen. Full bars just minutes ago. Jason cursed under his breath. He's jamming it. He knew we'd call. I looked at him. How the hell does some old man have a signal jammer? Jason's jaw tightened. Because he's not just some old man. The knocking stopped. Silence. That was somehow worse. Jason and I barely breathed. For a long moment, there was nothing. Then, footsteps. Moving away. The sound of gravel crunching under boots. A car door opening. An engine starting. Then he was gone. Jason exhaled, rubbing his hands over his face. This is bad. This is so bad. I tried 911 again. This time, it went through. A woman's voice answered, 911, what's your emergency? I opened my mouth, then hesitated. What was I supposed to say? Hey, this old man from a crime my grandma committed 70 years ago just showed up at my door? Oh, also, we dug up an illegal firearm and evidence of a possible murder? Yeah. That'd go over well. I forced my voice to stay steady. Never mind. Wrong number. Jason's head snapped toward me. Are you kidding me? I hung up. What do you want me to say? Help, officer. We dug up some criminal evidence and now a man from the past is hunting us? Jason exhaled sharply. Fine. But we're not staying here. He was right. If that man had found our address, it meant this wasn't just some random warning. It meant he had been watching us for longer than we realized. I grabbed the lockbox. We need to find out who he is. Jason nodded. And we start with Grandma. Because if she had spent 60 years hiding from this man, then she must have left us something. Asterisk asterisk anything. Asterisk asterisk to tell us how to stop him. And if she hadn't, then we were already dead. We left my apartment that night, taking the lockbox with us. Jason drove, his hands gripping the wheel so tight his knuckles were white. Neither of us spoke at first. What was there to say? Some old man from Grandma's past had just tracked us down. He had knocked on my door at 3 in the morning. He had somehow jammed our phones. And then, just as easily, he had left. Like he was giving us a chance. Or a warning. We should go to the cops, Jason muttered. I scoffed. And say what? Jason glanced at me. We say some old dude broke into your apartment complex and threatened us. He didn't threaten us. Jason's eyes flashed. He knocked on your door at 3 a.m. after jamming your phone signal. That's a threat. I shook my head. And what do we tell them when they ask why he's after us? That we dug up a gun from 1954? That our grandmother might have murdered someone and then changed her name? Jason sighed, running a hand through his hair. This is insane. He wasn't wrong. We need to go to Grandma's house. Jason frowned. Why? I tapped the lockbox. Because if she was running from this guy, she must have left something else behind. Something to tell us what the hell we're actually dealing with. Jason didn't argue. He just turned the wheel, taking the backroads toward Grandma's house. It was the only place that might have answers. And if we didn't find any, then we were already screwed. We pulled into the driveway just before dawn. The house felt different now. When Grandma was alive, it had been warm, welcoming. Now it was just an empty, silent thing, sitting in the dark like it was waiting for something to happen. Jason and I stepped inside, shutting the door behind us. The air was stale, filled with the faint scent of dust and old wood. Where do we even start? Jason asked. I didn't hesitate. Her room. Grandma had always been private. She never let us snoop through her things. If she had kept secrets, they'd be there. We climbed the stairs, the old wood creaking beneath our feet. I reached for the doorknob and froze. The door was already open. Jason's breath hitched. Did we leave it like that? I shook my head. We hadn't. Someone had been here. Recently. Jason pushed the door open, stepping inside first. I followed, my pulse hammering. And then I saw it. Grandma's room had been ransacked. Drawers pulled open. The mattress flipped over. Her closet emptied. Papers littered the floor, some of them ripped apart. Jason let out a slow breath. They were looking for something. I swallowed hard. Or someone. Because if this was about the past, if this was about what Grandma had done all those years ago, Then maybe it wasn't just the lockbox they were after. Maybe they thought she was still alive. Jason bent down, picking up an old, torn envelope from the floor. His expression darkened. Alex. He turned the paper toward me, and my stomach dropped. It was a letter addressed to us. But it wasn't Grandma's handwriting. And it had been left on purpose. We weren't just being watched. We were being hunted. Jason and I stared at the letter like it was a ticking bomb. It was old, yellowed at the edges, creased like someone had folded and unfolded it 100 times. But the handwriting on the front? That wasn't Grandma's. Someone had written our names on it. Jason turned to me. You open it. I didn't argue. My fingers trembled as I slid the letter free, the paper fragile in my hands. No return address. No date. Just words. You should have left it buried. You don't know what you've dug up. You don't know who's still looking. Walk away. Before it's too late. No signature. Nothing to say who wrote it. But we already knew. Jason's face was pale. He was here, Alex. I gripped the letter tighter. That man from the field. The one who knocked on my door. He hadn't just been watching. He had gotten inside Grandma's house. He had been in her bedroom, ransacking it, searching for something. And when he didn't find it, he left this. A warning. Jason grabbed my arm. We need to get the hell out of here. I hesitated. Not yet. Jason gave me a look like I had lost my mind. What do you mean, not yet? I knelt down, scanning the wreckage. Whoever had searched this room, they had been in a hurry. They had torn through drawers, papers, the mattress. But they hadn't looked underneath the floorboards. I ran my hands along the wood, pressing against the planks. Old houses like this always had secrets. Jason sighed. This is the dumbest thing we've ever done. But he was already helping me. After a few minutes of searching, my fingers caught on something, a loose board. I wiggled it, pried it up. Dust swirled into the air. Jason grabbed his phone and used the flashlight. And that's when we saw it. A second lockbox. Smaller than the one we found before. Just big enough to hold documents. Jason let out a nervous laugh. You've gotta be kidding me. I lifted it out, my hands sweating. There was no key. Just a rusted latch. I forced it open with the edge of Jason's pocketknife. Inside, there was only one thing. A single photograph. Jason and I leaned in. It was old, black and white, faded, but clear enough to make out the people in it. A young woman, standing next to a man. The woman. That was Grandma. Younger than we'd ever seen her, maybe in her early 20s. The man. Neither of us had seen him before. But we knew who he was. Jason's voice was barely above a whisper. That's Victor Lyle. The man she had supposedly killed. I swallowed hard. She wasn't just running from him. Jason turned to me, his face tense. She loved him. And then, a noise downstairs. A floorboard creaked. Jason grabbed my wrist. We're not alone. Jason and I locked eyes. We weren't alone. The floorboard creaked again, this time closer. Someone was inside the house. Jason moved first, snapping the lockbox shut and stuffing it into his jacket. I reached for my phone, but my hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped it. Did I even have service? I checked the screen. No signal. Jason mouthed. He jammed it again. Whoever was down there, they were prepared. A shadow passed across the hallway outside Grandma's room. Jason grabbed my arm and pulled me toward the closet. We barely made it inside before the bedroom door creaked open. Through the slats, I could see a figure standing in the doorway. It wasn't the old man. This guy was younger, maybe in his 40s. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in dark clothes. He moved differently than the man at the field. Quieter, more careful. Not someone who had spent his life doing hard labor. Someone trained. Jason was gripping my wrist so tight it hurt. Neither of us moved. The man stepped further into the room. He didn't seem surprised to find it torn apart. Like he already knew someone had searched it. Like he was looking for something specific. He moved toward the loose floorboard. The one we had just pried up. I held my breath. The lockbox. He would notice it was missing. Jason must have realized the same thing because he slowly, carefully, shifted his grip, reaching for something in his pocket. The gun. The one from the first lockbox. The one that had been buried with Grandma's secrets. I barely held in a gasp.
Was he serious?
Jason had never shot anyone in his life. Neither of us had. The man bent down, brushing his fingers over the loose board. I saw his shoulders tense. He knew. The box was gone. He stood up, his posture changing. He wasn't searching anymore. Now he was hunting. He turned, heading straight for the closet. Jason's fingers curled around the gun. I pressed my back against the wall, my heart hammering so loud I swore he could hear it. The closet door swung open. The man barely had time to react before Jason lunged. A struggle. A grunt. The sound of bodies colliding. I scrambled out of the closet, my legs barely working. The man grabbed Jason's wrist, twisting it so hard I heard a pop. Jason cried out, the gun hitting the floor. The man lunged for it. I didn't think. I just kicked him in the ribs as hard as I could. He stumbled back, knocking into the dresser. Jason snatched up the gun, his breath ragged, and aimed it straight at the man's chest. Don't move. For the first time, the man hesitated. Then, slowly, he raised his hands. He wasn't scared. If anything, he looked amused. You kids have no idea what you're messing with, he said. Jason's hands shook, but he held the gun steady. Who sent you? The man tilted his head. You already know. My blood ran cold. The old man, I whispered. The man smiled. Took you long enough. Jason's finger twitched on the trigger. Tell us what the hell is going on. The man didn't answer. Instead, his eyes flicked toward the window. I barely registered what was happening before. Crash. The entire window shattered inward. Glass sprayed across the room. Something hit me in the side, hard, sending me sprawling onto the floor. Through the chaos, I heard footsteps pounding down the stairs. By the time I looked up, the man was gone. Jason swore, rushing toward the window. I staggered to my feet, my ears still ringing. No sign of him. No car. No movement in the dark. Just the cold wind howling through the shattered glass. Jason turned to me, breathing hard. This isn't just about Grandma anymore. I swallowed, still feeling the impact of whatever had hit me. Jason was right. This wasn't about the past. This was about us. Jason locked the front door, bolting it shut even though it was useless now. The window was shattered, glass scattered across the floor, and whoever that man was, he had gotten away. I pressed a hand to my ribs where I'd been hit. It wasn't bleeding, but it hurt like hell. Probably a bruise. Jason paced the room, still gripping the gun with shaking hands. This isn't over, he muttered. They'll come back. I knew he was right. That man, the one who had broken in, wasn't acting alone. He had someone giving him orders. And we both knew exactly who that was. The old man from the field. I grabbed the lockbox and pulled out the photo of Grandma and Victor Lyle. The young, smiling version of her. The man she had supposedly killed. Jason sat down across from me, rubbing his temples. We need to end this. I took a shaky breath. There's only one way to do that. Jason met my eyes. He already knew what I was going to say. We have to go back, I said. To the field. Jason let out a bitter laugh. Yeah, great idea. Let's go back to the place where this all started, where a creepy old man with a vendetta is probably waiting for us. I swallowed. We don't have a choice. Jason hesitated. Then, finally, he exhaled. Fine. Let's finish this. The drive back felt like a funeral march. Neither of us spoke. The radio was off. The gun sat on the center console between us, the weight of it impossible to ignore. By the time we pulled up to the field, dawn was breaking. The first hints of sunlight stretched across the sky, painting the grass in eerie shades of gray. Jason shut off the engine. "If we die, I'm haunting you first." I smirked. "Not if I haunt you first." We got out of the car. The wind was colder than before, slicing through my jacket. The old oak tree loomed in the distance, right where we had dug up the lockbox. And standing beneath it, waiting for us, was him. The old man. He wasn't alone. 3 other men stood beside him, their faces unreadable. Jason tensed. "This feels like a setup." I ignored him and stepped forward, heart pounding. "Who are you?" I called out. "What do you want from us?" The old man didn't answer at first. He just studied us, his gaze settling on the lockbox in my hands. Then, finally, he spoke. "I knew your grandmother." A sharp pain twisted in my chest. "She didn't kill him, did she?" I asked. The man exhaled. "No." Jason blinked. "Then why did she disappear?" The old man tilted his head. "Because she took the blame." I froze. "She loved him," the man continued. "And when Victor was murdered, she knew who really did it. But that person wasn't someone she could turn in." I felt a lump form in my throat. "Who?" The old man's face darkened. "The people I work for." Silence. Jason swore under his breath. "You mean you killed him?" The old man shook his head. "Not me. But my employer." His gaze turned sharp. "Victor knew things he shouldn't have. Things that put people in danger. So he was dealt with. And your grandmother? Well, she was smart enough to know that if she stayed, she'd be next." My hands clenched around the box. "So she ran." The old man nodded. "She ran. And she hid. And for 60 years, she kept her mouth shut." His expression darkened. "Until you two started digging." I felt the weight of his words sink in. Jason shifted beside me. "So what now? You kill us?" His voice was defiant, but I could hear the undercurrent of fear. The old man sighed. "No." Jason frowned. "No. You two are a loose end. But killing you would only draw more attention." He took a slow step forward. "So here's what's going to happen. You're going to give me that lockbox. Every letter. Every piece of evidence. And then you're going to forget this ever happened." I swallowed. "And if we don't?" The old man's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Then I promise you, you won't like what happens next." Jason turned to me. His eyes were pleading. "Give it to him. Let it go." I looked down at the lockbox in my hands. Grandma had kept this secret for 60 years. She had built a whole new life. A family. And she had died keeping it buried. What was I supposed to do? Expose the truth? Risk everything? Or finally let the past stay buried? I took one last look at Jason. And then, I made my choice. I keep thinking about that man's words. How he said killing us would draw too much attention. But what if that changes? What if one day, something shifts, and suddenly Jason and I aren't just loose ends anymore? What if they come back? I don't know. What would you have done? Would you have given up the lockbox and walked away? Or would you have risked everything to expose the truth? And most importantly, do you think we're actually safe? That's it for today's story. If you enjoyed, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for more wild Reddit stories. Until next time, stay curious and keep the stories coming.